there a relational trauma definition with examples that might help you evaluate your own childhood experiences? Hi, I'm Annie Wright, a licensed psychotherapist and an expert in childhood trauma recovery. Every bit of my work in the world, including today's episode, is designed to help those of us from childhood trauma backgrounds to have the best adulthood possible, despite where we may have started out in life. I'm so glad you're here, and I hope that even one piece of information I share today can feel helpful. And as you're listening to me, if you suspect you come from a childhood trauma background, please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel and signing up for my newsletter in the show notes below. For now, as part of helping you have the best adulthood possible despite how you may have started out in life, we're going to explore today's topic. What is relational trauma? Do you see yourself in this definition and examples? So in this episode, we'll cover the following. My personal professional definition of relational trauma, what some examples of relational trauma might look like, what some examples of potential relational trauma experiences might be, and more. But before we dive into today's topic, I want to say one very important thing to you. No matter what you think or no matter how you perceive your experience, please remember, no matter where you're starting from, change is possible. Okay, to begin, in a recent episode I published, I shared 6 reasons how and why many people struggle to see themselves in the historically understood definition of childhood trauma. Those 6 reasons boil down to the limitations of historical definitions, the subtlety of certain experiences, because mother was the abuser, because the abusers may have been not just guardians or parents, but because they may have been others like coaches or religious figures or siblings. Another reason was because people viewed the privilege they had also experienced as some kind of neutralizer of the abuse experience. And other people couldn't see their experience because they experienced gaslighting about their experiences from others. And finally, other people sometimes didn't see themselves in the definition of childhood trauma because they had preconceived notions about what, quote unquote, counted as abuse or trauma. Now, there are, of course, many, many more reasons why people struggle to see themselves inside the definition of childhood trauma, and all of those reasons are what led me to using the term relational trauma very often and early in my work. In today's episode, I want to share my definition of childhood trauma with you and share some amalgam vignettes that reflect experiences captured by this definition, with the hopes that you may see the subtlety of your own experiences more clearly. So, over time, in response to what I experienced as limitations and how we have historically and collectively come to understand childhood trauma, I personally and professionally created a relational trauma definition that, to me, felt more expansive. And this is how I define it. Relational trauma is the kind of trauma that results over the course of time in the context of a power imbalanced and dysfunctional relationship, usually between a caregiver and child, but also between a child or adolescent and systems and communities, that results in a host of complex and lingering biopsychosocial impacts for the individual who subjectively endured the trauma and was overwhelmed by the experience. And honestly, one of the biggest pieces of feedback I receive about this definition and what I put out online is this: finally, there's a name for what I went through. Look, I'm not here to say that this is the only or penultimate definition of relational trauma, but I am here to say that when we ourselves use a more expansive definition of trauma, one that includes subjectivity at its core and more nuance in the origins of the trauma, we can perhaps see ourselves and the stories of others more clearly. And beyond a more expansive definition, one thing that can help so many of us from relational trauma backgrounds feel seen, validated, and normalized is seeing and hearing stories that reflect back aspects of our own lived experience. So these vignettes I'm about to share are amalgam vignettes, meaning they're mixed, blended stories from the hundreds of therapy clients I've worked with in the last 13 years as a licensed psychotherapist. These amalgams reflect situations and experiences that can lead to relational trauma depending on how they were subjectively experienced by the individual who moved through them. Now, at this point in the video, I'll say these vignettes might feel triggering, so please stop watching if you feel emotionally triggered or if you start to notice really uncomfortable feelings coming up in your body that you'd prefer not to feel right now. Just take care of yourself, okay? So with that being said, here are a few examples of potential relational trauma experiences. A father constantly criticizes his teenage daughter's appearance, comparing her to her friends and celebrities, telling her she needs to lose weight or dress differently to be accepted and loved by others, and telling her it's just for her own good. He doesn't want her to feel like the odd one out like he was. Another vignette. An older, much stronger and bigger brother who constantly bullies his younger, smaller sister, calling her names, hitting her, and hiding her belongings, while the parents dismiss it as normal sibling behavior and do nothing to intervene. Another vignette, a mother who micromanages every aspect of her son's life, from his homework to his friendships, telling him he'll fail if he doesn't follow her instructions exactly, if he doesn't spend time with worthwhile people. All of this erodes his ability to choose freely, but she claims she's just being a responsible parent, trying to get him into the Ivy League and into the right social crowd. Another example, a church that shames and ostracizes a child for questioning promulgated beliefs or behaviors, labeling the child as a sinner or damned, while the parents support the church's actions and refuse to protect their child, citing, "It's for their own good. This is what Jesus wants." Another example, a father who consistently undermines his son's confidence by mocking his interests, achievements, and any hint of effeminate behavior the son displays, telling him that he'll never amount to anything. But he justifies his actions, saying he's preparing his son for the real world and that only real men can make it in life. Another example, boarding school teachers who physically and emotionally abuse a student using excessive discipline, humiliation, and isolation, while the parents dismiss their child's complaints as exaggerations and insist they endure it all for the sake of a great education. Another example, parents who impose unrealistic expectations on their children, demanding perfection in academics, sports, and behavior. Any mistake or failure is met with severe criticism and emotional withdrawal, and sometimes physical punishment like a wooden spoon. Another example, a sibling who incites fear in their younger brother by frequently threatening harm or abandonment, using intimidation or control to manipulate, while parents see the older sibling as just strict or protective. Another example, a mother who constantly invades her teenage son's privacy, reading his journal, going through his phone, and questioning his friends, under the guise of protecting him, but really it's all about undermining his sense of autonomy and trust and safety with her. Each of these amalgam vignettes illustrates examples of dysfunctional, power-balanced relationships where the behavior of those with more power may lead to the child or adolescent subjectively feeling overwhelmed and not able to cope. Each of these vignettes has the potential to be a relational trauma experience with a lingering host of biopsychosocial impacts for the person who endured the trauma. In another episode that I'll publish, I'm going to be talking about the why and how of why relational trauma and those biopsychosocial impacts can be one of the most detrimental trauma experiences someone can endure. But for now, hopefully by sharing this high quality psychoeducation, you may feel that the term relational trauma more adequately describes what you yourself have lived through. And moreover, you may have seen aspects of your own story mirrored back to you in those vignettes I shared. And if you did, perhaps you felt validated. So now, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below if you're open to sharing. Does my definition of relational trauma help you see yourself and your story more clearly? Did any of those vignettes speak to you? And if so, which one? If you feel so inclined, please leave a message below in the comments so that others can benefit from your share and wisdom. Honestly, you just never know who on the other side of the world you might be helping when you share your story. Finally, if you're still not sure if this content applies to you, if you're still not sure if you come from a childhood trauma history or feel its impacts now in adulthood, I would invite you to take my signature quiz, Do I Come from a Childhood Trauma Background? It's a 5-minute, 25-question quiz I created that can be incredibly illuminating and will point you in the direction of a wide variety of resources that can be of further and immediate help to you. Plus, when you take the quiz, you'll be added to my mailing list where you'll receive twice-a-month letters from me sharing original, high-quality pieces with accompanying YouTube videos and audios you can stream, all devoted to the topic of childhood trauma recovery, and where I share more about me as a person, my life, and how I'm journeying through my own childhood trauma recovery and general adulthood. My newsletters are the only place where I share intimate glimpses into my life, including photos, the resources that are supporting me, the things I've discovered that delight me, words that are uplifting me, the practices that nourish me, and more. So please be sure to sign up for my mailing list whether or not you want to take the quiz. I'll link to both of these things in the show notes below. Finally, thank you so much for listening to me today. I truly hope that even a small part of what I shared felt helpful to you. If you found value in this information and would like to stay connected with my latest content, please consider giving the episode a like. It helps more than you know. Also, subscribing to my channel and turning on the notification bell ensures you're always up to date with my newest episodes. I appreciate your support and look forward to continuing this journey with you. So thank you. And until next time, please take such good care of yourself. You're so worth it.